If I were to have a topic versus Keynote, I would basically call it Only the Schizophrenic Will Thrive. And my topic is how to navigate the digital revolution and the coming analog resurrection. Okay? So I have a big belief that you're about to see a massive analog resurrection, which will live simultaneously with a digital revolution, which is why only the schizophrenic will thrive. And if I were to say it as a person or individual, or to an individual, I would say embrace the complexity of your two selves, or embrace duality, because I'm going to hope to make the case that that's what's going to make companies and people succeed. So let me begin with why I believe we are in a world of digital revolution, but in a slightly different way than providing you with statistics, since you know what the statistics are, right? Instead, I'll use a term which I call digital leakage. And digital leakage is the fact that once something becomes digital, it's like hydrochloric acid. It doesn't stop. Any place, it just burns through everything. So, for instance, one form of digital leakage is where both your competition and your opportunities come from. Sometime now, I guess, or 20 minutes ago, if I got the timing right, a company that used to be called Apple Computer, introduced some new products. And interestingly, when they introduced their now somewhat old product called the iPhone, Mary Meeker of then Morgan Stanley called it "I'm not a phone." And everyone thought she meant "I'm not a phone" because AT&T had horrible service. But what she really meant was it was a computer that just happened to be also a phone. And companies like Nokia did not pay attention. Company like Microsoft, which will on Friday have their series of announcements, including Surface, basically scoffed at the toy. And it basically came to a position where today the iPhone sales are bigger than all of Microsoft's as a corporation. But as importantly, people who did not pay attention to it was Nintendo. Because guess what? If you've got angry bees or angry birds on your phone, why do you need the Nintendo DS? And the next company that's going to go down, I'm just keeping to the ends, will be Nikon. I'm a big photographer. I have a lot of Nikon stuff, but you know what? I'm too small, their stuff is too big. Their stuff is also not very connected. And the reality of it, a picture is useless unless you can share it. Because if you think about our good friends at Facebook, they are not a social network, and anybody who told you that they're a social network has never used Facebook. It's a content sharing network where today the content is photographs. Period. 65% of the time, we basically spend time commenting on people's photographs, looking at people's photographs. 15 to 20% of the time, we curate our lives to make it look much cooler than we really are. If someone came to your home and they basically said, "I'd like to look at all your photographs in your cupboard, and then I'm going to tell you how cool I am," you'd say, "That's very antisocial behavior." It's not even the social network, it's the people's network. And what people like doing is they like peering and promoting, and that's what it does. And they're a big music distribution engine. They were obviously a gaming distribution engine. If it wasn't for legal laws, you'd have Netflix on it, reads on the board. It's a content generation. But what tends to basically begin to happen is, in effect, it's a huge competitor to the future content generation companies. So whether it's Nikon, or whether it's Nintendo, or whether it's Navtech, which got bought by Nokia, all of these companies did not see where this digital leakage was coming. So to a great extent, in my strategy role, I don't fixate on other holding companies because I know what they are. They're like us. Maybe a little less pathetic, maybe a little bit more pathetic, but they're like us, right? But there's a lot of other people who are coming both as an opportunity for us and as potentially sort of a threat. So that's one form of digital leakage. Another form of digital leakage is the fact that people, customers, consumers, members, users, whatever your industry calls them, don't actually care about your category. They really don't. So a lot of companies make the mistake of benchmarking against their competitors. Now, if you could define your competitor clearly in this very strange digital leakage world, that's good for you. But then if you only compare yourself versus them, that's only you who are comparing, not the person who actually uses your product or service. So somebody doesn't say, this is the best mobile experience for a packaged goods company. And it's really cool because it's better than other packaged goods companies. They basically say this thing sucks compared to Amazon, or this thing sucks compared to something else. And you say that too. And then you come back to work and you basically start thinking about your competition. The real challenge in America and all over the world is we are behind the consumer, we are not behind our competitors. We benchmark against our competitors and we let new people take away our consumers while we're eyeing each other. And that's a big form of digital leakage, which is consumers, people don't care. So if you think about that, that is one reason why there's this interesting revolution, because digital leakage allows completely new industries to form and consumer behavior, or people who are watching consumers, begin to pay sort of interest. So that's one form of digital revolution or leakage. The second is the single most powerful medium of both entertainment and marketing is television. 10 years ago, I wrote something, and thank the Lord we did, and we bet the company on it. I'm still here, which is good. And I called it the era of visual engagement. It was 2001. And I said, let's go deep on TV wherever we can. Okay? It was going to be multiple screens. It was going to be about online. We did the first network upfront, sort of the online upfronts in 2004. We did a whole bunch of stuff. But it was video, video, video. Don't get mistaken on anything else, because it's sight, sound, and motion that makes all the difference. So where is that going? Now what's basically happening is digital is taking over the television set, which is the most powerful sort of medium, or the screen. But what we've noticed is it's in a very strange and unusual way. And the action is at the intersection. And what do I mean by the intersection? You will notice increasingly that people are consuming video with two screens. Not one, not three, two. Now you'll see cartoon characters, their teenage son with 5-6 screens around them, but that's a cartoon character. Okay? You'll see other people with one screen, and that's because they haven't been able to afford the second screen. But as the cost of the second screen comes down, there'll be more and more second screen. But here comes the real surprise. That big screen, and then will be vertical. The small screen will be horizontal. When you're at home, the big screen will be the biggest television you can find. The small screen will most likely be a tablet, but could be a phone. When you're in a bar, The big screen is the TV. This is often the phone. And when some of you all, I mean, I fly all over the world. I'm not even based in New York. So one of the things I do is like I roam around because I go to the bathroom often since I fill myself with alcohol. And I kind of like look at things and I try to do what are people doing. And what I now see is a lot of people are utilizing either their laptop or the vertical incline of their iPads or other tablets as their vertical screen. And their phone is their horizontal screen. But here comes a really interesting thing. Interactive TV is not going to happen on TV, which is one thing I've always believed. So whenever there were all these canoe and all of this, that's a dead duck. When people say, I'm not paying no attention. It's got nothing to do with human behavior. It's got to do with Comcast and other behavior, which is not human, right? It's corporate, all corporate. I've got nothing against Comcast, big client of ours. Nothing against Microsoft, big client of ours. But the whole idea is corporations are not people. They're made up of people, but only Romney thinks that they're people, right? But it's made up of people. Corporations don't think that way. The only thing we want from a big screen is on demand. That's all we want. That's the only interactivity I want, which is, can I get it streaming and can I get it on demand? Do I want to interact with that thing? Do I want to order that infamous Jennifer Aniston sweater? No, I don't. I really don't. I'm going to do all of that on my horizontal screen. That's where I'm going to have my Twitter feed. That's where I'm going to have all the stuff. That's where all the Z-Box information is going to be. That's where everything else is going to be. Yeah, that's going to be synced up with the cloud. It's a two-screen experience. And so that's another form of sort of digital revolution, which is by basically taking over the big screen. So people's behaviors are changing. There's a form of digital leakage. Clearly, the screen is changing. And now comes the third one. And the third one is why we're going to basically have analog resurrection. It's this little thing called mobility. So I believe mobility is very analog. And it's one of the reasons why the big digital companies are struggling, because they don't do analog. Okay? All things analog are becoming digital, we know that. And I was yelling that in 1993. All things digital are becoming mobile, we know that. All things mobile are becoming analog. What do I mean by that? When you basically have a mobile device, what begins to matter more important than anything else is where you are and whom you are with. Much more important than even who you are. We've built an entire industry ecosystem optimizing who you are. I'll build a case that where you are and whom you are with could be more important than who you are, because it is place and time and people-based relevance. And what's beginning to happen, whether it's showrooming or a whole bunch of other stuff, is think what happens when you have your little mobile phone. How much of what you're actually doing, I would say 60% of what you do on your mobile phone is an analog behavior. It's about people and places. About 30-40% is digital. And so what's beginning to happen is you have all these big digital companies that have optimized for who and a whole bunch of other stuff, and my whole stuff is I give a damn. Like, I also don't believe that mobile is going to be big for advertising. Because who the shit cares about advertising on your mobile phone? You care about utilities and services. I want utilities and services. Tell me like what's across the street. Give me a service. Let me go in as I go to Starbucks and get a whole bunch of stuff. Let me go to Walgreens. Let's figure out what's going on. Give me utilities and services. I don't need a stupid ad. It's going to be fantastic for marketing, not necessarily a huge deal for advertising. I'm not saying that there isn't going to be advertising dollars. Of course there will be. But it's not the big thing. And so everyone is focusing on advertising. And my basic belief as the advertiser is saying, why? Something else. The advertiser, so that's one form of analog resurrection. So mobile is bringing analog resurrection. The other thing that's bringing analog resurrection is a basic belief that certain momentum plays have stopped. So for instance, I'm a fan of all these companies, and for some strange and unusual reason, I get invited to speak to them. So I spoke to the 1,000 top people at Facebook 5 days before they went public. And they basically said, you go, and then we throw you out of the room because this is a quiet period, and then Zuckerberg goes. I said, oh, that's good. I get a good, stuff. And my job was to talk to them about marketing, which I kind of sort of did. But it was very clear that they don't understand marketing, because they had the biggest branding event in the world and they didn't realize it was a branding event. They thought it was a financial event. It was a financial event. It was a superb and successful financial event, right? Massive money raised with minimum dilution. Short-term gain, long-term pain. All of a sudden, you've got all the marketers in America saying, maybe we don't have to do this. Big problem. People watch Zynga's stock price, they watch, Google missing on mobile. Guess what? The old-time marketers are saying, I don't know, our businesses are looking pretty good. Right? Wall Street. They were convinced all agency holding companies were going to be disintermediated. One of my stupid jobs was to convince them we weren't. And I was quite convinced we were going to be disintermediated too, but my job was to tell them don't. So I said, oh, what the shit. Okay, I'll figure it out. Now I'm completely convinced we won't. It doesn't mean we'll survive and we won't go in our horrible cockroachy way to horrible death, but we will be okay. And the reason we will basically be okay is because nobody with a tech multiple will come into a service business. No client is willing to fire themselves. The reality of it is they'll experiment. When Wall Street is asking, companies like P&G, why do you have so many people? Their whole basic stuff is going to eventually be, what business are you in? So the reality of it is, if your business is built on scaring the bejesus out of old school people, those days are over. They're not going to be scared anymore. They're going to look at you and say, we're going to spit on your face. Okay? I'm sensing that. Do I think that's right? Not at all. Right? But I'm basically sensing the momentum has shifted, and it's an analog resurrection. And mobile makes it happen. The advent of television makes it happen. Remember, the increase in television upfronts was larger than 60% of the entire display marketplace. If you're just talking economics. So it's a very interesting way of looking at it. But the most important part of the analog resurrection is back to people. I don't believe companies have a silicon problem. I believe we have a carbon problem. I don't believe your companies have a silicon problem. I believe we have a carbon problem. Silicon is about technology and about zeros and ones. Carbon is about people who always answer, it depends on my mood, maybe, I don't like changing, what the hell has this got to do with my turf, and things like that. And the reality of it is, the future does not fit in the containers of the past, and all our organizations are containers of the past. And we think by doing press releases and platform partnerships, we're going to get ourselves into the future. Doubt it. Watch us, we're going to keep changing. We've changed and we'll keep changing. Because the reality of it is, even what we constructed 4 or 5 years ago doesn't make sense anymore. Right? So the stuff is blow it up. Do something better. And what tends to basically happen is, that's what I always ask among companies that are on the cutting edge, which is, how come you all aren't changing fast enough? Because I can understand us, we're like dullards, right? Big companies. But the reason eventually is who we sell to, which is, we eventually as management of companies sell to 3 types of people. We sell to clients, we sell to our clients' customers, and we sell to our employees. And what I've last heard or seen is people choose with their hearts and they use numbers to justify what they just did. All the time. Because if this was a completely irrational world, we would have no luxury products, which is the high growth industry. We'd all be driving Yugos. There'd be no Mercedeses. Starbucks could be out of business. Wealth is created irrationally, not rationally, when you think about it. But so you really need both. You need rational and irrational, which is the whole idea of the dualism, which is we are living in a digital dominant world because of digital leakage going all over. But we're also living in an analog resurrection world because the digital and analog world becomes very hard to separate. You can basically go from watching a TV ad to tweeting about whether you like the product experience within 2 minutes before a marketer even knows you're a target audience. Think about it. That's the speed with which we're basically doing stuff, right? Now, with that, what would I basically therefore do if I were us? Okay, so here's what we're doing. That doesn't mean that's good, but that's what we're trying to do. The first thing, to a great extent, that we have to pay attention to is the future is going to require two models. So, good old Andy Grove talked about only the paranoid will survive. That is actually complete bogus thinking for today's age. It was very good in those days. The problem is a whole bunch of companies truly believe that everybody outside is the enemy. In a networked, collaborative world, that's stupid. That's really stupid. They could be the enemy. Some of them are possibly the enemy, but if everybody's the enemy, then you got yourself a problem. But one of the key things, to a great extent, is the reason I say only the schizophrenic will thrive is most companies now have to operate two business models. They have to operate a business model optimized for today, which is between 60, 70, 80, and 90%. So most of the companies that you all go and work with, including many of the companies that you all work with, right, make most of their money still the old-fashioned way. It's not that they earn it. We earn it doubly hard. But, they make money the old-fashioned way. And then there's new ways of making money, which is what many of us do. The reality of it is there are sometimes different cultures, there are different objectives, there are different goals, there are different ways of doing things. We sometimes mix them up. Sometimes the mistake we make is we basically make the people who run the big things also oversee the small things. But the small people actually are sometimes smarter than the big people. But they're not smart enough to run the big thing, which is the really interesting thing. So which is why you need to have this whole schizophrenic model. And increasingly, you're going to see more and more companies working on a schizophrenic model. And there are lots of books on it. In fact, the latest Harvard Business Review on agility is about the schizophrenic model. There's a famous book called The Other Side of Innovation, written by a bunch of General Electric people that you should read, which is a lot of the data that supports that that's the way to do it. So one is, think about two models that you run. And it's not skunk works. There are lots of tricks to it, but there are two models that you run. The second thing that I would suggest is have a lot to drink. I'm a big one for alcohol here, okay? And then with a fresh sheet of paper, with some of your colleagues in your company, write down 2 or 3 things which are the law in your industry. Every industry has certain laws which you just cannot, put away, put those laws. The next thing you basically do is put down what you consider to be your biggest assets. Okay? Then what I'd like to do is I'd like you to then put down what you know about your customer, consumer, prospect, people. 3 or 4 key things you know about them. Unmet needs, good met needs, whatever it is. That's all you need. Design a company to meet those needs, utilizing those assets within the constraints of the law. Don't worry about anything else. When you have that company, what you're likely to say, or product or process, what you're likely to end up saying is, oh shit, that's a good thing. Go do it. If you don't do it, someone's going to do it. All incumbent companies have in them not only the seeds of their own disaster, but the seeds of their next resurrection. I truly believe. And usually the only reason that they don't do it is because of culture. Only because of culture. There's nothing to do with investment. It's got nothing to do with a whole bunch of stuff because it's all about culture. And so the last thing I would sort of end up with, or the second last thing I would end up with, is, I know we've all had lunch, but I have to say this. Call out the turd on the table. I go to too many places where all of a sudden I'm asked to go in, and I go in alone to the CEO or the executive vice president of something. And I go in without anybody from any of my brands, and I don't even know this silly company, okay? But I quickly figure out, I learn about it really fast, so they're kind of surprised. Like when I go in there, I actually talk about it in a very strangely knowing way, though I don't know much. But one of the key things is because nobody tells management the truth. They don't. How much of your time in meetings are spent talking about what happened outside the meeting? How many times does nobody call out the turd on the table? And often the turd on the table is you don't know what the shit you're talking about to management, right? Oh, look, we've got this problem. Why are we talking about 7 other problems? And 80%, 70% of corporate nonsense is about everything but the turd on the table. And my basic belief is call the turd out on the table. You know, my boss, he says 10-15% of my job is to basically make our global board pink in the face. Right? So I go in, I build out this whole thing about how I'm going to crush them completely with this particular business plan, and they laugh at me, and then they get pink in the face because I actually have hit a nerve. And then I say, by the way, I have a solution for this. Right? And so it's very, very important to actually be brave within companies. We keep talking about innovation, but our cultures of most successful companies are fear. And we have to be careful. I would then end with one thing. There's only one way that I now know to change companies. This is after 30 years, I've learned this fine piece of, insight. Sorry, there are 2 ways, but they end up doing one. There are 2 ways. You change people's mindsets, or you change the people. Period. If someone tells me that they're going to do it in any other way, I said, I don't believe it. It's never worked. Change people's mindsets or change the people. Now, I worked in the same stupid place for 30 years. Okay? So very clearly, I'm unemployable everywhere else. So I'm holding on to my dear life, right? And based on that, one of the key things is I don't want to be the person they change out. So I've always got to change my mindset, which I constantly do. So there's always new information. Some of you all may have, after listening to this, said the turd on the table is you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay, there's no analog resurrection. There's no digital leakage. This is all about butterflies. And here's why, which is fine. I might investigate butterflies. But part of it is your individually, which is one of the key things I'm trying to go with our company, needs to improve yourself. And the single biggest reason is we keep blaming everybody else, our bosses, our company, and everybody else, that they are useless. It may be true, right? It may be true. My boss is cool, but it may be cool, okay? But maybe we are scared that we are becoming irrelevant. And I think that's really the big issue. When I talk to very senior people, the reason I go alone is so that I can sit with them and say, here's how I'm continuously irrelevant and what I am doing to not be irrelevant. Maybe you should do some of the same thing. Okay? And I would suggest just 2 things in that, and I'm going to shut up. Time is up. The first one is use every new platform you can get your hands on. Which is, for instance, since social is cool, I'm all over social. Even though I have no friends, I'm all over social, right? So you'll find me with my name, and I'm looking for friends. You'll find me on Facebook, on Pinterest, everywhere. I check in like a zombie on Foursquare, right? I operate 3 blogs because I want to learn how Tumblr works, Posterius works, WordPress works, right? And by the way, I have a little small job, so I don't have that much time, but I do it. Why? Because if I don't do it, I'll be irrelevant. And that's just in the social field. right? So today, some crazy person sent Maurice Levy some crazy note about Fido or whatever, right? So he forwarded that crazy note to me, and I forwarded back a crazy note to him saying what I thought was stupid, but by which time I've already signed up, used it, and decided it was stupid, right? And as to the rational reason as to why maybe I was wrong, but here's what we needed to look at. But the truth of the matter is that unless you actually do it, it doesn't make any sense. And then the other one is forget your business. That's the last thing I would tell you. Remember, there's this digital and analog. Our digital business, by the very nature of what we do, has got too much science in it. It's got too much math, right? It's got too much terminology. You all know what I mean. And by the way, I'm a math major and a finance major, so I've got nothing against math and finance. Spend at least 1 to 2 hours a week on the arts, because that's how you will actually understand human beings, because the future is going to be about storytelling and about purpose, and you will never get that from mathematics. Thank you.
Any questions? We should have people with mics. I see someone up front.
We have Vanessa as one. It's Vanessa, I think, right there.
Dylan, Will's on the way. Yes.
Were you calling me Vanessa?
Joanna.
Sure.
I didn't say that.
I was like, the blonde woman? Is her name Vanessa?
No.
You said Joanna. I heard
who's doing it right, Rishad? What companies do you admire? Who's getting it right?
First of all, most companies that are successful are doing it more right than wrong. But I would basically point to, in the analog world, I think Disney is one of the more sophisticated. The companies that I sort of look at right now are Comcast, NBC, Universal, still in the process of doing it. I believe Disney is in an interesting way doing it. I think, oddly, Google is trying to rethink itself in an odd and unusual way. I would not underestimate what Twitter is doing, because they're actually probably most set up with regard to the sort of second screen. And you would normally find within most organizations that they have the answer often lying within the organization, but it tends to be about 2 or 3 levels away from senior management. And the best thing that you all could do, since most of you all are senior management, is find those people. And not promote those people, but celebrate those people. But it's basically any culture that does. I look for a culture which has 3 things in it. The first is, how do they incentivize? So when someone tells me they want change, I say, okay, tell me what your incentive systems are for change. And what you find is they don't have incentive systems for change. They actually have a disincentive system for change. They have press releases for change, but they don't have incentive systems for change. So tell me what the incentive systems are, which is number 1. Number 2 is, can you tell me about how your recruiting and education and investment in talent is? So the second area that I look at. And third is, can you explain to me who you believe your competitors are? Okay, because often companies define themselves by their competitors. So those are the 3.